everyone, welcome to the Fortress of Solitude podcast. I'm your host, Sergio Pereira, and guess what? It's 2021, and we're still in the post-apocalypse. Amazing, isn't it? But you know what? It gets better, don't worry. Because today, I have got comic book extraordinaire Tim Seeley on the line. Tim, how the hell are you?
So good. So far, so good. I can't even talk. Yeah, so far, so good. I survived the new year, this 3 days, 4 days, whatever we're at. So, yeah.
Well, that's really good because, I mean, I know everyone else is just, at the moment, we're all in survival mode, so it's good to hear that you're doing well. And, I mean, we're here today basically because you are doing something really cool at the moment on Bloodshot. And, I mean, Bloodshot is one of those titles from Valiant that, you know, there's been different iterations of it, and I've loved every iteration. I mean, I'm a huge Bloodshot fan, you know, both the comics and the movies, and I've even seen some of the cool figurines that, you know, I'm putting it out there that I want to get for my birthday. But when you found out that you were writing Bloodshot for the first time, what was the first thing you decided you weren't going to do with the title?
I mean, I definitely knew I couldn't be sort of a postmodern, like, I couldn't take the character apart, I think, because that's sort of what had been done in previous arcs. And I kind of felt like my job was to build him up so that, you know, people who were coming in that had seen the movie and were interested in the character would have somewhere to start, you know, instead of us trying to like figure out, like, you know, how to break him. I kind of felt like my job was to make him easily accessible and to make it fun and to make it feel sort of like a big action movie.
Cool, man. And then the other thing is that I've noticed, like especially on this run, is that this Bloodshot book feels a little bit funnier than the other versions. I've gotten that feeling about it. It's like got a little bit of humor. Like, I mean, I saw a sneak peek of one of the new issues, and I mean, there's a little bit of a reference there to an actor that may or may not be playing Joker in one of the other like movies. And I thought it was like really well done, you know, the stuff it's there. But at the same time, it's still got a lot of over-the-top violence and gore. And I know that you obviously come from the horror side of things, you know, with horror comics, you know, hack and slash. And you've also dabbled in a bit of horror comedy there. Did you have any reference points or inspirations when you were writing like this type of Bloodshot? Like, you know, for example, something like RoboCop, which has obviously got a lot of social commentary, but, you know, it's still quite almost funny and over-the-top gory, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely that sort of Paul Verhoeven RoboCop aesthetic is definitely sort of burned into my brain. I grew up in 80s action movies, and my dad was a big fan of, you know, that stuff. And I also just think comics should be fun. So, you know, it's hard for me not to write something that doesn't occasionally have humor in it, because life occasionally has humor in it, no matter what you do.
Yeah.
You know, even the worst of times, there's occasionally something. Even if it's so bad, it's funny. Sometimes that happens, and I kind of feel like, you know, it adds texture to an action story or a horror story, especially, to make it feel like life. You know, I mean,
yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, definitely. But RoboCop is like my favorite thing ever. So that having some influence is probably there. I also was really influenced by the Bloodshot run that came out sort of at the end of the Acclaim series, where they did this Frankenstein's monster approach to it, where, you know, he didn't look exactly like he does the traditional one. He didn't have a red dot or anything. He was just like this big, pale Frankenstein's monster guy with goggles. But I thought that run was so clever. I think it was by Len Kaminsky and Sal Velluto, I believe. I'm pulling this sort of out of my butt because I just found that series yesterday in my my back issue collection. But that was a big influence, just because it was a gruesome but sort of funny story, and, you know, it was a little bit more on the horror side of things because it was Len, than usually the traditional sort of more mafia based end of the Bloodshot series from the 90s.
No, that's really interesting that, you know, obviously you're bringing in like some sort of influences, and you're also referencing a bit of the past, because especially with Bloodshot, I think there's a tendency sometimes that a lot of the audience and a lot of people look at the character kind of almost, you know, they kind of look at the character as almost like it's Valiant's Punisher, which I think, you know, is kind of, you know, devaluing the character a little bit, because I think there's a whole lot more than just, you know, basically calling him Valiant's Punisher. I think there's a lot more going on. But at the same time, there's, you know, you obviously worked on G.I. Joe like books, you know, quite a while back, and I was just wondering, like, was there anything from those sort of books that you thought to yourself, hey, this is like, I need to bring this into, obviously, you know, a character that's obviously as violent as the likes of Bloodshot? Was there any reference points that you maybe might have used, or any inspiration there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the the thing with G.I. Joe that made its way to mine is definitely the sort of the colorful villains, so I think the Burned is sort of, me, and the Burned is kind of my Cobra, I guess. They're sort of, this weird array of spies and stuff with these crazy costumes. And so, yeah, that's definitely a big part of it. And the characters from, the I can't even think of their name because they're, have a name in the book. The group you have for in the beginning, what's their name? But they were kind of influenced, obviously, by G.I. Joe a little bit. Big crazy vehicles and that kind of stuff. The first issue, attempt to sort of make a grounded, semi-realistic thing, but also it's a big crazy action movie, and they should have helicopters that don't exist yet, and they should have weapons that that were made up, and all that kind of stuff. I think is just adds to the fun and the texture of these kind of stories.
So tell me, are you looking forward to getting some Bloodshot figurines and then basically making them out like you used to have your old GI Joes, having them there and having big wars together? Is that something that you plan to do?
Action figures. I've tried to cut back, but I collect Masters of the Universe figures and then any of the sort of peripheral knockoff figures from the 80s. So I always have action figures around. I always love action figures. I kept a lot of my GI Joes from when I was working on that book. I used to get the figures. So. Dude, if I could have a big G.I. Joe style sized run of Bloodshot figures and EXO and stuff, I would definitely have them around my room. That's for sure.
Yeah, please, you need to convince my fiance that there's no such thing as too many figurines. She keeps telling me, no, just, we don't have space for stuff in our house. We don't have space for this. I'm like, no, come on. There's always enough space for figurines. We can make space. Let's get rid of your wardrobe. It's fine. Make some space there.
Yeah, I definitely, since the pandemic, then I'm able to convince myself even more that I need more toys, just because that little jolt of, chemicals that you get when you buy something is just enough joy to get you through most days, So
yeah, definitely. It's it's just making me feel better. This is my personal happiness. Just give me figurines.
That little bit of dopamine is all I needed,
Awesome, man. Now, going back, obviously, to the comic book, the movie came out in February, and it was February or March, actually. I think it was March, if I'm not mistaken. And, it really sucked that it came out at a time when COVID hit. I remember, I actually went to go watch the movie, and literally the next week or something, there was lockdown restrictions worldwide. So it obviously really impacted, I think, the reach in terms of the cinematic views. But I know that the movie's done really well on Netflix, and, things have been planned. And I also noticed that now characters from the movie, you got your Wilfred Wiggins and KT, they've been introduced. Now, obviously, was this something that was discussed, with your editors beforehand of characters that you need to introduce, or were there plans already? How did you guys navigate that?
Oh man, it was rough because we had planned on, we were going to introduce those characters in the Free Comic Book Day book, which was going to come out May 5th or whatever around there when Free Comic Book Day traditionally is. And we had everything planned out. Then the arc that followed would have been 9, 10, or 11, 10, 11, and 12, which would have set us up for this sort of movie parallel. We would have had those characters set up, ready to go. And obviously COVID hit, and then the movie was delayed. The release of Free Comic Book Day books was delayed. And our arc got pushed back by 3 or 4 months. No, more than that, I think. Because we're just putting out... I don't know. It was definitely a big delay. So our plans were completely scrapped, and obviously there are worse things to happen from the pandemic. But just trying to re-coordinate that after was so hard. And by the time I came back to write issue 10, I think it was 11. I had forgot most of what I was going to do. I think it was 6 months between. It's between March and September. Yeah, so 6 months.
Yeah.
So I completely forgot what I was going to do, which is okay because what I was going to do was kind of made irrelevant to some degree by just, what happened politically and what happened in the world. So, it was rough. It was definitely a hard sort of, lesson learned. To try to make a plan is definitely a good way to have it go haywire.
No, it's really interesting you mention that, because especially with those characters, I think that they were like some of the strongest parts of like the Bloodshot movie, like especially like Wiggins, you know, as a comedic relief. It was just everybody loved Wiggins. I remember like every time his scenes, you know, came on screen, like people were losing their minds. Okay, partially because the movie was also shot in South Africa, and like obviously the local crowd was going nuts, you know, seeing Cape Town. Hey, it's Cape Town, it's cool. But like Wiggins just like stole the show. And he's a character which I feel that, you know, he brings like a certain element, like, you know, I kind of always, like the way I saw him, like, you know, he's like a funnier version of Felicity from Arrow. Like, just to be honest with you, that's the way I see him. You know, he just like reminds me of like that funnier version of it. And do you see this character like playing a big part going forward in like the Bloodshot universe? Like even after you're gone from the series, like hopefully many, many years from now.
No, I hope so. I mean, he follows this sort of tradition of, you know, when you're writing a comic book character who, you know, is kind of a solo act, like to have them have somebody to talk to is really useful for your exposition and also for texture and for character. And, you know, we've tried to kind of set that up in Bloodshot going along, always giving him someone to talk to. And usually the further that character is from your lead, as far as personality and style, the more sort of contrast you get and more, you know, sort of interest you get. So, yeah, I instantly liked the Wiggins character. I hadn't seen the movie when I started writing him because we didn't get to early screeners. But I knew who the actor was, and I had seen him on other shows, so I just had a pretty good guess of how he would play it. I was mostly right. So we just, you know, we used the notes from the screenplay and the trailer and stuff and just sort of based it around that. And yeah, I think it worked out. But, you know, having him sort of like, you know, and going back to, you mentioned Punisher, that makes me think of like, he had microchip, right? He had somebody to talk to. Otherwise, you know, it's just, you're inside someone's head all the time. And you know, so there's always like the idea of these characters like having a ground control, right? Like they report back to Barbara Gordon, or they report back to, you know, so some, and having that. But our thing was to work it out so that he had a good reason to be there. And, you know, having him kind of come in at the end of the previous arc where Bloodshot has sort of resolved to leave himself in a place where he can't be used. And then Wiggins comes in and be like, nope, sorry, you have to come back. Kind of felt like a good full circle for the character.
Yeah, cool, man. And I mean, obviously, now with this Bloodshot series, what do you absolutely aim for? Like, if a new reader is coming to pick it up, coming in like completely fresh, what do you hope they get from this Bloodshot book, apart from obviously being an introduction to the character that they might have seen in the cinema, or like, you know, obviously associating with Vin Diesel? Like, what is the one thing as a writer that you look forward to saying, you know what, this is a mark I want to leave on the character. This is what I want to leave behind. Because I mean, we all know that like comic book writers love to do that. They want to leave a legacy, you know, with certain characters and do something that changes them forever, like moving forward.
Yeah, I'm not one of those guys. I mean, I kind of feel I'd rather, you know, come in and make something accessible and bring people to the book. That's what I would rather do than you know, just leave my mark. Like, I think that's sort of egotistical, and I know people do it. But my job is certainly like get people to read this book and have them stay with the book. And so, you know, the accessibility was my main thing. Like, you know, the first issue, we tell you the deal, and you always know, you know, what he wants and where he's going, and it's what his powers are, like all those things, just so it's clear and then entertaining and fun and big, you know. And also I felt like my job was to be bigger than a movie, right? Like to do things every issue that they couldn't do in a movie, because obviously we compete with films to some degree now more than ever, because they're doing our characters. So that was a big part of it for me too. It was just, you know, okay, we know what the movie's going to be, and now let's up the stakes, the size, you know, the scope, and really, you know, push it so that you want to keep coming back to comics, because we can do things that you can't do in a film. Cool.
All right. Now, I know everyone always asks you about Hack Slash. I mean, that's like, you know, one of the books that you're best known for. But I'm going to flip the script here a little bit, because there's another book that you wrote a while back that I'm absolutely a huge fan of, Imaginary Fiends. Do you remember that, Tim?
I love that book, and I have never understood why it just didn't. It was kind of under the radar, partly because I think it was Vertigo towards the end. But yeah, love the book. Thank you for asking about it. I wish I could do more of it. It's one of my favorites.
So are there any plans that you actually have for those characters? I mean, obviously, I don't know if it's, you know, you've obviously got a rights issue there because of Vertigo obviously moving to DC Black Label, if I'm not mistaken. Or is there anything you can actually do with it? Or is it still like, you know, one of those things that are with the lawyers and the people with suits?
I mean, it's up to Warner Brothers what they want to do with it. They have the rights to the comic. And we talked about it, but it's just, yeah, because of the, you know, Vertigo was shut down as a label. And so all the stuff that exists through that would go through DC Black Label. And at the time they were doing very few of those, and they were doing the Vertigo sort of version of that, of the Super Sandman universe was kind of their main focus. So, you know, I think there was kind of a perception that Imaginary Fiends would probably be kind of confused as being either, you know, part of that or just, it would probably just not be able to stand out at the time. But I don't know. I wish they would do something with it. They obviously, there's interest in all that stuff, is TV shows and movies, everything. But that's a good reminder. I should probably check back with them and see what's going on, because I would love to do more of it. And the art by Stephen Molnar is so awesome. Colors are so good by Quentin. I just love that book. I think it's really cool, and I wish it was a bigger hit.
No, really. I mean, I love this series. I remember at that stage, we were still getting the books from DC, like for review every week. And they used to send obviously the superhero books, and they also send the Vertigo stuff. And I remember just looking forward to Imaginary Fiends. It was just such a good book. I'm like, oh, cool. You know, Imaginary Fiends, like, you know, like dive into that. And I just always like, sometimes I know it's like, you know, in comic book world, we always know that, you know, superheroes tend to like always overshadow everything else. And like sometimes when the really good books get lost in the shuffle, but that is like something especially for me that I'd really like to see come back. And also on that note, like, is there something else that you're working on at the moment that you'd like to punt, like something that, you know, that you think that people would be interested in, especially people who like hack and slash and Imaginary Fiends like myself?
This one is not even similar to those two, so I don't know if it'll work. But I really like the book I'm working on right now, Money Shot, which is from Valiant Comics. It's set in a near future where scientists can't fund their projects, so they have to shoot porn with aliens, basically. And it's a kind of comedy series, but it's also, like you said, it's a lot of commentary about the state of our world. And it happens to be even more relevant with the case that we have of coronavirus and underfunding the CDC and all the stupid things people did not to listen to scientists. So even more relevant. Plus, there's lots of sex scenes in it, and it's comedic. But the first trade came out the beginning of the summer, I believe, and the second one comes out in April. But yeah, definitely proud of it. You should definitely check it out. Drawn by Rebecca Isaacs and colored by Kurt Michael Russell, and looks beautiful.
Fantastic. Well, Tim, thank you so much for your time today. And I'm going to give the floor to you to just punt a little bit where people can find you on social media, if you want them to find you, or if you're under a closed account. I'm not even sure right now, because I know everybody's just like, Twitter's the death of us. So just, yeah, feel free to punt wherever people can find you, and maybe drop you some questions about the books and about what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. You can find me on Twitter at Hackin' Tim Seeley. I'm on Instagram at Tim Seeley. My website is timseeleycreative.com, and I think that's most of where I am. I got off a lot of social media, but I'm always on damn Twitter and Instagram. So yeah, find me there. Ask me questions anytime. I'm usually pretty good about getting back to people. So, and I appreciate it.
Awesome. Great, and thanks. And to everybody else listening, thanks again for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And yeah, let us know what you'd like us to be chatting about more. And until next time, see ya.